So I'll begin this discussion with a quote from the Sufi mystic Rumi. He said, "Why struggle to open a door between us when the whole wall is an illusion?" It's like saying, have you climbed a mountain? Yeah, well, but there's so many different levels, heights of the mountain, and I feel like I am really just beginning to experience the happiness that How often do you think of the brain as being an organ that is absorbing impurities like a liver, and that your mind, both of them are absorbing all sorts of impure thoughts that limit you in so many ways? And how do you wring it out? How do you squeeze it out and get all that stuff out? Well, it's just year after year, thought after thought. This part of us up here is absorbing it all and keeping it in, and we don't realize that we're watching life through such a filter of this. It's like a water filter that we didn't change. It's very difficult to change, but that's what the teachings of unity are really here for. Paramahansa Yogananda said that having a technique and having devotion to the divine, to the infinite, is an unbeatable combination. And I had that. I'd always had that yearning. Now I had a practice. 3 months after meditating, I woke up one morning and I was making breakfast, and I realized I am so happy making this breakfast. Wow, I'd never had that experience before. And as the day wore on, I realized I was just happy being alive at a level that I never had before. And everything around me was an expression of the divine. And so I remember when that first happened, for 3 weeks, I wandered around in bliss, just so filled with this joy that was just pouring out of my being. And then I had to go to work. And that was the tough thing. It was to be able to maintain that awareness. And so happiness is something we satisfy on so many different levels. We have a hunger for food, and we feel some degree of happiness when we satisfy that. If we're not able to breathe very well, we have a hunger for air, and we feel some satisfaction. And there's a spiritual yearning, which I think is the most important, the most deep yearning, and we don't know how to satisfy that. But the answer, by studying the great saints and sages of all traditions, I think, all comes down to this very same thing, which is you won't find it in a book, you won't find it by saying certain words. You can use those things as tools, but they're all for the same purpose of aligning your heart and mind to the point where you are so focused on awakening to this deeper level of consciousness that it becomes your main drive in life. What is my state of happiness when I'm at rest? That is a key question. So before I had my awakening and progressed in this path, if I wasn't entertaining myself, if I wasn't having some kind of sensory stimulation or working my mind in some way, my resting state of happiness was sort of dull, sort of flat, and then I would be bored. So one of the things that happened with this awakening was the awareness that I'm filled with this life energy. I'm connected to the universal life energy. So just sitting here, I feel that life force thrumming through my mind and my body. So it's ever present. I've never yearned for any level of intoxication after that first initial awakening, never again. But of course, in my teens, in my 20s, my early 20s, I was seeking some way to bring myself to a higher happiness level in my resting state. So you can't really find that. So you use drugs, you use alcohol, whatever, and always it's temporary, and then it leaves you in kind of a pit afterwards. Another thing that happened was that I can recall being in hell at various times, like when I was with a girlfriend in college, and she took me to a dance, and she ended up going off and dancing with other people for most of the dance. And I was in a rage. I was seething. I felt so
rejected and hurt. And that was part of the drama that I would experience in my human consciousness. And so I have never, since that initial awakening, I have never felt any deep pain from another human being, because I'm awake now to the fact that I am part of this universal divine consciousness. And so nobody can take that away from me just because they behave in a certain way or they say a certain thing. And these aren't things that I'm just thinking about and trying to make myself happy with. It's an awareness, just as if somebody stepped out of a cave and is now aware that there's a broader, brighter world. No, I get pissed off now and then. Everybody's familiar with the idea of breathing and becoming aware, but it's even more powerful if you've meditated and become aware of your inner life force, because then you can literally just draw it up. You can just go, and it's not just breathing, it's feeling the inner life force rising up and penetrating your consciousness, clearing your mind, and then whoever you're angry with or whatever the situation, you're able to be restored to balance and say, I love you.